Engineer Michael Torres married Sierra Ventel on a Tuesday afternoon in the small chapel attached to Epsilon Station's residential sector. And everyone told him he was the luckiest man in the outer rim. Sierra was Kithaerin, a species known for analytical brilliance, technological expertise, and distinctive long ears that gave them hearing ranges far beyond human perception. She was beautiful by any species standard, intelligent in ways that made Michael's engineering work feel simple by comparison, and inexplicably interested in a human mining engineer who spent most of his time calculating asteroid extraction yields. Their courtship had been intense, but relatively brief, 9 months from meeting at a mining conference to standing at an altar exchanging vows that blended human and Kithaerin traditions. Sierra was open about most things. Her work as systems analyst for a contractor supporting multiple species infrastructure projects, her family back on Kythera Prime, though she rarely contacted them, her reasons for leaving her homeworld to work in human-dominated space. I wanted something different from traditional Kithaerin society. But there were gaps Michael noticed but didn't question. She never video called her family, only sent text messages. She had scars on her arms, long, precise marks that she attributed to childhood accidents. She sometimes woke from nightmares she claimed not to remember. She was hyper-aware of her surroundings in ways that seemed excessive for someone working in safe orbital environments. Small inconsistencies, personal boundaries. Things Michael filed away as either cultural differences he didn't understand or personal trauma she'd share when ready. Everyone had histories. Sierra would tell him when she trusted him enough. The wedding was beautiful. Michael's mother cried. His sister gave a toast about finding unexpected love across species. Sierra's handful of Kithaerin colleagues attended, though notably none of her family. The ceremony blended traditions: human exchange of rings, Kithaerin sharing of harmonics, a vocal resonance that signified bonding, promises made in both languages. On their wedding night, in the residential quarters they'd share on the orbital station where Michael worked, Sierra held him close and her long ears pressed flat against her skull. The Kithaerin expression Michael had learned meant deep distress or fear. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Something I should have told you before the wedding, but I was afraid you wouldn't understand. Promise you'll hear all of it before you decide what to do." Michael's stomach dropped. "Sierra, what? Promise, please, hear everything then decide." "Okay, I promise. What's wrong?" Sierra took a breath that seemed to hurt. "I'm not who you think I am. Or rather, I am, but there are things about my past I didn't tell you. Dangerous things. Things that put you at risk just by being married to me." Sierra's dark secret wasn't what Michael had feared in that moment of panic affair, criminal history, still married to someone else. It was simultaneously less dramatic and more serious than any scenario his imagination had conjured. 10 years ago, Sierra explained, she hadn't been a systems analyst. She'd been Kithaerin military intelligence. Specifically, an analyst working on counterterrorism operations targeting the Kethra separatists, a violent extremist faction that opposed Kithaerin integration with the wider galactic community. "I was good at my work," Sierra said, her voice flat in that way that suggested she was controlling emotion through clinical detachment. "Pattern analysis, data correlation, predictive modeling. I identified cells before they could act, found supply chains, mapped networks. My analysis led to raids that prevented at least 4 major attacks, saved hundreds of lives, maybe thousands." She showed Michael her arms, the scars he'd seen but never questioned. "The separatists targeted me specifically. Retaliation for the work I'd done. They kidnapped me, held me for 3 months, tortured me for information I refused to give." Her voice never wavered, but her long ears trembled. "These scars aren't childhood accidents. They're from restraints and interrogation tools. The nightmares you've noticed are memories I can't escape even a decade later." Michael felt sick, not at Sierra, but at the image of what she'd survived. "Kithaerin Special Forces eventually extracted me," Sierra continued. "But by then the damage was done, physically, psychologically, politically. The separatists had put a bounty on me. Substantial one. Bounty hunters from multiple species have been hunting me for 10 years. The Kithaerin government offered protection, witness relocation, new identity. I refused. Why? Michael managed. Because living as someone else felt like letting them win. like they'd taken not just 3 months of my life but my entire identity. So I left Kithara Prime instead, moved to human space where separatist influence was minimal, and tried to build a new life. Under my real name, as myself, because hiding forever wasn't living. Sierra's eyes met his. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to marry someone with a target on them. Didn't want you to spend your life looking over your shoulder, wondering if the stranger approaching us is just curious or a bounty hunter. Didn't want my past to endanger your future. But I can't start marriage with this lie between us. You deserve to know what you've married into, what threat I've brought into your life just by being in it. She stood, moving toward the door. I've prepared annulment documents. Claim I withheld critical information, completely true. Site safety concerns, absolutely valid. You can end this marriage and I'll leave the station. Go somewhere else. It's not fair to you that I, Sierra. Stop. Michael's voice was firmer than he felt. Sit down. You promised I'd hear everything before deciding. I haven't decided anything yet. Sierra sat, but her posture screamed preparation to run. Michael processed the information methodically, the way he approached engineering problems. Break down the components. Understand the system. Identify the actual issues versus the assumed ones. 10 years. You've been living with this threat for 10 years. Yes, the bounty doesn't expire. Separatists don't forgive or forget. I've been careful, stayed in human space, maintained low profile, changed my routines constantly, learned to read potential threats. But the danger never completely disappears. And you thought I'd what? Divorce you because your past put you in danger? Leave you to face this alone? Sierra's long ears performed a complex movement, surprise mixed with confusion. You should be angry I didn't tell you before the wedding. You should be concerned about the safety implications. You should. I'm angry, Michael interrupted, but not about what you think. I'm angry that you survived torture by terrorists for doing work that saved lives. I'm angry that you've been living with this threat for a decade. I'm angry that you thought you had to carry this alone. But I'm not angry at you for not telling me until you felt safe enough. And I'm sure as hell not leaving you to deal with this by yourself. But the danger? Tell me about the actual threat level. How many attempts have there been? What security protocols do you maintain? What precautions do we need to take? I want practical information, not apocalyptic scenarios. Sierra stared at him. You're asking for operational details. Yes, because my wife is in danger, and I need to understand the reality so we can address it. But I don't need to annul our marriage because the woman I love survived something terrible and chose to keep living under her real name rather than hiding in witness protection forever. That's not a dark secret that disqualifies you from marriage. That's evidence of strength I can barely comprehend. Something in Sierra's expression cracked, the controlled detachment giving way to raw emotion. I was prepared for you to leave. I have contingency plans for when people find out and reject me. You thought I'd abandon you because your past was complicated and dangerous. Michael moved to sit beside her. Sierra, I'm an engineer. I solve problems. This is a problem with parameters and variables and solutions. It's serious, yes. It requires planning and precautions, absolutely. But it's not insurmountable. And it's definitely not a reason to end our marriage before we've even started. He took her scarred hands. You've been dealing with this alone for 10 years. You don't have to anymore. Tell me everything. The threats, the protocols, the safety measures. Let's figure this out together. Over the following weeks, their marriage developed unusual rhythms. Sierra taught Michael to read threat indicators. The way someone watching her differed from normal attention, patterns in crowd movement that suggested surveillance, body language distinctions between curiosity and hunting. She showed him her escape protocols. Emergency contacts maintained across multiple systems, weapons training she'd never mentioned, the combat skills that existed beneath her analyst exterior. Michael learned that his wife had lived for a decade as someone constantly prepared to run or fight, that every social interaction included threat assessment, that her hyper-awareness wasn't paranoia, but survival skill developed through brutal experience. They established new protocols together. Michael's engineering background helped him think systematically about security, redundant communication systems, varied routines, establishing safe locations. Sierra's intelligence training provided frameworks for risk assessment and threat response. It wasn't romantic. It was practical, sometimes exhausting, and definitely not what either had imagined their first months of marriage would involve. But it was real, built on complete honesty, and somehow stronger than relationships built on less complicated foundations. 4 months into their marriage, the abstract threat became concrete reality. A Vrexian bounty hunter tracked Sira to Epsilon Station. Vrexian were known for persistence, violence, and very high success rates. Station security detained him before he reached their residential sector. Routine identification scan flagged him as having outstanding warrants across multiple systems. But the message was clear: they'd found her. Sira's first instinct was to run. I should leave. Go to another system, try somewhere the Separatists haven't tracked yet. You'll be safe if I'm not here. Or, Michael countered, we deal with this the way we said we would, together. They reported the incident to station authorities. What started as local security matter escalated quickly when Kithaeron diplomatic channels got involved. Turned out the galactic community had been pressuring Kethra separatists for years about their bounty system. Targeting civilians who'd worked in counterterrorism was violation of multiple treaties. But until now, most targets had hidden in witness protection or died trying to evade hunters. Sira was the first high-profile case of someone living openly, surviving for years, now having her safety threatened in human space. The incident became diplomatic leverage. Kithaeron government officially requested protection for Sira under interspecies security agreements. Human authorities, not wanting terrorist-related incidents in their territory, assigned protection detail. Other survivors, people Sira's intelligence work had saved 10 years ago, began speaking publicly, putting faces to the abstract analysis that had led to her kidnapping. Slowly, the narrative shifted, from fugitive with price on her head, to survivor targeted by terrorists, to someone the galactic community should be protecting, not hunting. The bounty didn't disappear. Separatists were too fragmented and too committed to revenge for that. But practical threat diminished as diplomatic pressure made it increasingly difficult for bounty hunters to operate. Sira wouldn't be safe forever, but she was safer than she'd been in 10 years. 6 months after the wedding night revelation, Sira and Michael attended therapy together. Not for marriage problems, their relationship was solid, built on the honest foundation of that difficult conversation. But because Sira needed help processing trauma she'd carried alone for a decade, and Michael needed help understanding how to support her through recovery. The nightmares didn't disappear, but Sira stopped pretending they didn't happen. The hypervigilance remained. Decade of survival training couldn't be unlearned easily. But Michael learned to recognize when she was in threat assessment mode versus when she was just existing. They developed communication around her needs. I'm scanning right now, give me a minute versus I'm having a hard moment, I need you. Years later, when people asked about their relationship, how a human engineer married a Kithaeron woman who'd hidden such a dangerous past, Michael told the simple truth. She thought her history would make me leave. She'd survived torture, lived with death threats for 10 years, built a new life anyway, and she thought revealing that would be too much for me to accept. But the secret wasn't that she'd done something wrong. It was that she'd survived something terrible and chosen to keep living as herself rather than hiding. That's not darkness. That's strength. When someone you love shows you that kind of strength, you don't run from it. You stand with them and figure out how to build a life together that acknowledges reality. And Sira, when she told the story, emphasized different truth. I was prepared for rejection, had planned for it, expected it, built my entire revelation around giving him an exit. But he didn't ask if he should leave. He asked what precautions we needed. He treated my trauma and the ongoing threat as problems to solve together, not as reasons to abandon me. That's what partnership actually means, facing complicated realities together rather than requiring perfection as the price of admission. The dark secret that could have destroyed their marriage became foundation for something stronger. Relationship built not on perfect romance, but on